Well, hi, everybody. I'm Don Stewart, and welcome to another edition of Breaking News for this Thursday. It's the 10th day of April, 2025, and we've had four important headlines concerning both the United States and Israel versus Iran, as well as progress made in Gaza that have come across the wire in the last several hours. So let's get right to them. All right, a second aircraft carrier has now arrived in the Middle East, the Carl Vinson. This is rather formidable now with both Harry Truman and Carl Vinson there in the Middle East within striking distance of both the Houthis in Yemen and Iran. Now, there's an interesting question that's been coming up from Israeli websites. Can Israel's defense heads trust Trump to secure a good nuclear deal with Iran? And there, of course, is discussion back and forth on that. We'll talk a little bit about that. And really good news, the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, is to evacuate Rafah and create a buffer zone along the Gaza-Egypt border. In other words, what they'll do, they'll put out about 3.5 miles from the Egyptian border, get basically evacuate the entire town of Rafah and make that a buffer zone. Put their armaments in there and encircle Rafah, so nobody can get across the border with any weapons, with anything that would harm the Israelis, because they're there at the border, and any tunnel that they have would certainly not go that far deep into the territory of Gaza. So it's a good move, as we've talked about. They're taking more and more ground every day and boxing the Hamas terrorists in. So this is really good news. And also in a story, and we don't know if this is true or not, we certainly hope so. Donald Trump says we're getting closer to returning the hostages. Hamas are very bad people. All right, let's look at the headlines. The first one, a second U.S. aircraft carrier has arrived in the Middle East. This is from Washington. The second American aircraft carrier has reached the Middle East, where Washington's forces are carrying out nearly daily airstrikes against the Yemen Houthi rebels, the U.S. military says. The USS Carl Vinson, which is armed with F-35C stealth warplanes, is now working alongside the USS Harry Truman in the region. U.S. Central Command says in a post on X that featured side-by-side video clips of aircraft taking off from the two ships. The Pentagon announced last week that it was increasing the number of American carriers in the Middle East to two after launching the latest round of its air campaign against the Iran-backed Houthis in March in a bid to end the threat they pose to the civilian shipping and military vessels in the region. Now, the firepower with both of these carriers will indeed be formidable. Now, add to this, you have the B-2 bombers and the other military assets that are stationed on the island of Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean. So Iran is obviously concerned about the possibility of an attack, which, depending upon its severity, could leave them damaged in such a way that it would take years to fix. However, there are some who believe that this lineup is for show and not for use. In other words, what the U.S. is doing with the B-2 bombers and Diego Garcia, the two carriers there within striking distance of Iran, are for show to get Iran to negotiate to make a deal. If that's the case, what will the deal be? And that's the big question. Will it be satisfactory to Israel? And that leads us to our second headline. Can Israel's defense heads trust Trump to secure a good nuclear deal with Iran? We read that government officials are growing more and more concerned that the U.S. president will strike a deal with Iran without considering Israeli interests. Remember what Trump said today. He said if there's an attack on Iran, it will be a joint venture led by the Israelis. But America's calling the shots, and America alone will decide what to do. So what we have going on here is a heated and crucial debate going on within the defense and the political establishments in Israel over whether U.S. President Donald Trump will cut a mediocre new nuclear deal with Iran. Depending upon the exact details of the deal and the specifics of its implementation, a new Trump deal could push Iran back from a nuclear weapon over a period of years without Israel having to risk a major airstrike, or it could hamstring the IDF from acting during a unique and historic window of opportunity for attacking Iran's program. Now, the article goes on to say some Israelis are hopeful that Trump will not agree to an unfavorable Iran deal. They are optimistic and believe he will not agree to any deal that Israel would view as a bad deal, such as something similar to the JCPOA, the thing that Obama did in 2015, where he did an end run around Congress, didn't even deal with Israel there, and decided to basically unfreeze all the $150 billion of assets of Iran if Iran would do A, B, C, and D, which Iran basically has not done these. So the people that believe that Trump won't do the same thing, they note that U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth reference to B-2 bombers with bunker buster bombs moving into the region. In other words, they have the bombing capability of really going deep into the ground, deep into the bunkers, and putting neutralization, shall we say, on Iran's program. And Trump's made also many tough threats against the regime, and portions of the Israeli military intelligence appear to be in this camp that really believe this. However, some Israelis, and there's always some, that are afraid that Trump will cut a bad deal. Other Israeli officials are pessimistic and are voicing deep concern that Donald Trump will cut a deal along the lines of his deal with North Korea during his first term as president. If you recall, they're going to remind us of this. That deal was heavy on dramatic meetings, announcements, and symbolic gestures to claim diplomatic victories. But the article says in practice had little impact in getting Pyongyang to reduce its nuclear weapons program. Well, that's not entirely true. Again, this is from the Jerusalem Post, and all these sites, all these Israeli sites are leftist, and so many of them are trying to throw cold water on anything good that happens. And let's remember something, what happened in North Korea, to try to correct this article. What it took place in Trump's first term, North Korea launched a rocket with a dummy warhead, the same size and weight of an actual nuclear warhead, and that rocket flew 6,000 miles, where it could have reached the east coast of the United States of America. And Trump says, unless you hold back your nuclear program, unless you stop, testing, basically stop testing these long-range missiles, we're going to reduce your island to a cinder. And little rocket man capitulated to Trump at that time. And so that wasn't the bad deal that this article says it was. And what's really interesting, there have been so many articles, not only fake news, but from Israelis, you expect them to do better and sort of rally around the country, but very negative news because they hate Netanyahu so much. They can't give him any credit for anything. And they're always looking at the glass being half empty rather than half full. So this article here says, well, there are some that think it's going to be a good deal, but then there's the possibility that it's going to be a bad deal. The Ayatollah will pull one over on Trump, and Israel will be in a worse shape than it is before. Well, Donald Trump is not Barack Hussein Obama. We don't expect to see that. But anyway, we need to at least examine what's been said and look at these accusations there. But again, at the end of the day, we just don't know. It's how we've responded to this article. Here's my reply. There are indeed a lot of unanswered questions. In other words, there are many unknowns at the present. Will the meeting on Saturday in Oman tell us anything about what we should expect in the future? So much is riding on this outcome. And again, what we have to do is simply wait and see. For again, nobody really knows what the U.S. and Trump plan to do. Okay. Now, shifting gears, we do know that Israel is making a smart move in Gaza as we come to headline number 3. IDF to evacuate Rafah, create buffer zone along the Gaza-Egypt border. The Israeli Defense forces are finalizing plans to evacuate Rafah city and establish a strategic buffer zone along Gaza's southern border in what Israeli officials describe as a critical step in the dismantling of Hamas's military presence in the area. That's exactly what it's going to do. Now, here it is in a nutshell. It centers on the construction of what's called the Morag, M-O-R-A-G corridor. It's a new security strip that extends from the Mediterranean coast in the west through the former settlement of a place called Morag and connecting to the Philadelphia corridor. Again, what Philadelphia corridor is, remember, that's the border between Egypt and Israel there, or Gaza, Israel and Gaza. Okay, and that is where this whole area will be this security zone. The corridor is expected to stretch up to 5 kilometers, 3.1 miles into Gaza, effectively encircling Rafah. So Rafah, the town on the border, will basically be encircled. So nothing can get from Egypt to the rest of Gaza. We're in southern Gaza here to the northern or central Gaza, unless it goes through this security zone. So everything that is, there that comes through will be able to be scrutinized. And the tunnels certainly won't be a factor because there are tunnels that will pop up there. it doesn't seem to be very possible that they're that long. It would stretch 3.5 miles into Gaza. I don't think they've seen a tunnel that far yet. So anyway, Kotz, the defense minister, said earlier this week, Rafah will be evacuated. The area will become a buffer zone to eliminate Hamas's ability to regroup or smuggle weapons through the southern border. That's a huge, huge step of cutting down Hamas's ability to fight against Israel, and it's coming against increasing IDF activity in southern Gaza, which has updated its evacuation map showing its expanded clearance zones near the border. Now, the Israeli officials are emphasizing that the buffer zone is necessary to prevent the reconstitution of these Hamas forces, right? And the use of smuggling weapons between Gaza and Egypt. It's not only tactical, it's strategic. Control of Rafah and the Philadelphia corridor will close off Hamas's last remaining external supply routes. All right. Now, they've not yet launched a full ground operation in Rafah, but preparations are being made. We mentioned yesterday our friend David Tal, reporting from Israel, said there are 5 divisions ready to enter Gaza. He said he's seen the tanks. He's a former tank corps commander, so he would know. And so they're waiting to even go further and to again cut the head of the snake off, at least this snake, the one in Gaza. So again, when and where, what they'll do, we will have to wait and see. Now, speaking of wait and see, we've got a fourth headline. And dear God, we hope this one turns out to be true. Trump says we're getting closer to returning the hostages. Hamas are very bad people. U.S. President Donald Trump addressed the situation of the hostages held by Hamas in Gaza today. He said there are 59 hostages. There is progress. We're getting closer to their return. We're dealing with Israel, but also with Hamas, who are a group of bad people, Trump said. Now, interestingly, Steve Witkoff, the U.S. Special Envoy who spoke with families of hostages today and stated the deal to free their loved ones could be days away. A very serious deal is on the table. It's only a matter of days, he said. Well, what's the problem with that? Well, remember we heard this from Witkoff before, only to realize that Hamas lied to him. In fact, he had to admit that he had been duped. So, is it real this time? Will the hostages be released? We hope and pray that this will be the case. But as is true with our other stories, we must wait and see for the results. So to sum up, events continue to take shape around Iran and in Gaza for a victory for Israel in both places. We'll keep you posted on any developing or breaking stories hit the wires. In the meantime, and here's our call. Let us remember our orders that the Lord Jesus Christ gave his original disciples and to those who follow him. Preach the gospel and make disciples from all nations. That's what we're commanded to do. That's what we do here, and trust that's what you're doing in your own life. I'm Don Stewart. Thanks again for watching. Continue to watch and pray, and we will be back with you again tomorrow for another edition of Breaking News. Until then, as always, may the Lord richly, richly bless.